So, what other stories have you got?
One more. There was a horse. The horse sought vengeance upon his enemy, a stag. But he could not kill the stag alone. The horse met a man, a hunter, and made a deal. He took the man's bit and bridle and allowed him to ride in a saddle on his back. Together, they killed the stag, and the horse tasted victory. But the hunter would not release the horse, and made a slave of him.
Like so many, I ignored God of War until 2018, when God of War brackets 2018 proved to be so damn good, spoiler alert for which side of that little controversy I come down on, I had no choice but to go back and play the entire franchise from the beginning. Then God of War Ragnarok came out, and it was so damn good, I had no choice but to do the whole damn thing again. Rather than continue to annoy all my friends with all my thoughts about it, I thought I'd try writing them all down. Perhaps even arranging them in a logical, or at least semi-coherent sequence, so as to make some kind of overarching point. So sing to me, muses, as I take the people on a journey through the Mobius strip I've made of the life of Kratos of Sparta. For the sake of clarity, we're going to start all the way back at the beginning.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
When we, the player, either in 2005 or now, first meet Kratos, we meet a man driven to the literal edge of a cliff. Flashback 3 weeks to the deck of a ship besieged by hydras, packs of zombies, and harpies, and it's not hard to see why. Trapped as he is in a Greek mythology-flavored action-adventure puzzle platformer from the middest of the mid-2000s, Kratos' life is already two different flavors of Sisyphusian torment. For us, the player, those two flavors are like peanut butter and chocolate, but for Kratos, they are constant reminders of failure and futility. There are many reasons why Kratos is correctly labeled the anti-hero of his Grecian adventures, but one of the first we encounter, in this first level of this first game, is his complete failure to save anyone, having already categorically failed to save himself. As we carve our way through what we'll later learn are the zombie soldiers of Ares, we come across civilians who either recoil in horror at the sight of us, or start babbling about the prophetic visions they had about us. All we get out of trying to save the people in the captain's cabin is some 3D rendered blood, and all Kratos gets out of it is a PTSD flashback. We don't even bother to save the captain from the Hydra that eats him. And while the Hydra fight is spectacular, there are few left alive in this little flotilla we're on to appreciate it by the time we're done. We are already a figure of infamy, if not yet myth. We are the ghost of Sparta, a phrase I find weighty in itself, since the popular conception of Sparta could accurately be described as its ghost. Yeah, they won the Peloponnesian War, even if it took them 30 years. And they spent the next 30 years pissing literally everyone else off, including the Thebians, who'd eventually defeat them. The subsequent 16 years of city and countryside-destroying warfare left everyone south of Macedonia weak enough for King Philip II, and his more famous son Alexander, to roll them all up like a human Katamari ball. And that's how the Greek Golden Age ended and the Hellenistic period began, kids. Don't cite me in your papers. My gross oversimplification there probably pissed somebody off somewhere. But that's the gist of Sparta's story. Who cares about all that, though, when we could focus on that one heroic last stand that one king made that one time, which we only really know about because his grave, allegedly, survived the intervening millennia relatively unplundered. In that spirit, God of War takes place outside of history, in the same mythological no-time as the 90s Hercules and Xena TV shows, and the mid-20th century fantasy monster movies that inspired them. There's a line about halfway through Jason and the Argonauts, when the Argo is passing through the clashing rocks. Argus, the shipwright, implores Jason to pray to the gods for salvation. But Jason, having already been through half a movie's worth of bullshit, on his quest for the Golden Fleece, which he's only undertaking in the hopes it'll help him reclaim his kingdom from the man who murdered his parents and sisters 20 years prior, with Zeus's backing, says,
"The gods of grace are cruel. In time all men shall learn to do without them."
And that is both the thematic and theological stance of the God of War franchise. The gods of Greece, from that horny old goat Zeus on down, are users and abusers. Believing in them and doing favors for them will only lead to misery and suffering. To act as their agent is to actively spread that misery and suffering through the world. They are the mob, and we are a hitman who thinks we can escape the life. I hear you paint Augean stables. We chafe at this, of course. In the very next scene, in fact, when Kratos chides Athena for what he sees as a failure to hold up her end of the Greek hero's bargain. In myth after myth, we find Athena handing out magic weapons and tactical counsel to heroes, who in turn usually get some kind of solace out of their quests, if only until they appear as the antagonist in other people's stories. Looking at you, Perseus. By this point, Kratos is 10 years into his heroic treadmill run, and Athena does a very good job appearing to promise the relief he wants without actually promising anything. Ares is attacking Athens, and Zeus has forbidden the gods from openly warring with each other. Can't have another Trojan war, I suppose. So it's up to us to kill Athena's brother and save her favorite city. Then,
the past that consumes you will be forgiven.
Just one more job, the Godfather's favorite kid tells us. Then you're out. Pinky promise. As if charging a Spartan with saving Athens isn't a troll move all by itself. It's in Athens that God of War, both this game and the franchise as a whole, cements its reputation for being spectacular and using the scale of its conflicts as a challenge in itself. Once we get out of the docks with their cavernous warehouses full of 2 big boxes, we go up a staircase, and there he is. There's the God of War. As the camera pans out far enough to capture all of him, it seems to say, "You see that there? Big as Godzilla, twice as ugly. The object of this game is to kill that. Have fun." And we do have fun. You'll see him in the background as you fight your way through town, only blocked out by the city's tallest buildings in its densest urban core. Yeah, the other gods pop up to give us various magic spells, indicating they're uniting against Ares under the universal principle of fuck that guy, as they did in the Iliad. But we are still a tiny man facing a war god at the height of his power. A broken mortal, he'll rightly call us, near the end of things. Before that, though, if you look on the floor whenever the gods appear, under the magic spells they offer us, you'll see the first of many, many Omega symbols that will haunt Kratos throughout his journey. The franchise will eventually retcon this symbol into meaning war. But at this point, it's more like the number 23 and the number 23. It's everywhere. It's in the architecture. The Oracle of Athens is wearing one, once you get within astral projection range. Another oracle from another village will be wearing one in a flashback much later on. And even at the end, you'll find it there, on the final door to the game's final room. A sign of things to come, as inevitable as bad weather. The doom that came to Olympus, already present at the start. But for now, we just have to fight our way past the crowds of fleeing Athenians, who scream and run from us as much as the zombies, cyclopses, minotaurs, and gorgons. With good reason, since this is your time to get used to the combat, and Kratos is not a precision instrument. You can grab and throw individual enemies, and doing so to the bigger guys makes taking them out trivial, but the true power of the Blades of Chaos lies in their ability to stun-lock whole rooms. They are the weapons of a bloodthirsty madman. They make Captain America's shield look like it obeys the laws of physics. An older, wiser Kratos will eventually call them hateful things, and he'll be right. But their hatefulness makes a nice contrast to the danceable fighting style they encourage. Turns out the power of stunlock is the right of all beings, and the amount of enemies you'll face make getting surrounded far too easy. So just like in real life, the prudent thing to do is to not be there when they try to hit you, and then to hit them back so many times that they can't even think about hitting you again. If I were novelizing these games, unfortunately someone beat me to it, the word pirouette would get more use than it does in the Witcher books. These blades are the pinnacle of bullshit video game weaponry. They are also constant reminders of the object of our quest, since we will eventually learn they come from Ares himself, forged in the depths of the underworld, from the primordial chaos fire that my fellow X-Men fans know as the Phoenix Force, the fire that birthed all things in the ancient Greek mythological universe, and to which all things are fated to return eventually. With a little help from us, of course. We don't know any of this yet, and won't learn even half of it until we leave Athens. Because God of War Brackets 2005 is from an era of console gaming that didn't have the budget or time to put its story front and center. Instead, the story of Kratos is relegated to flashbacks, within this game-long flashback, doled out across our journey. We'll reach the end of a hallway, and get another piece of Kratos' story as a treat. A treat to us. They usually come to him when he's facing something horrible. And he'll be doing a lot of that throughout the course of the game. Thus we see him rise to captain a Spartan army, call to Ares for help in the midst of a desperate battle, serve as Ares' earthly champion for an indeterminate amount of time, and eventually get tricked into murdering his own wife and daughter, all part of Ares' mad quest to create the ultimate warrior. Of course, putting it that way is kind of like saying, the bartender tricked me into drinking those 20 beers and driving my truck through the living room, where my wife and daughter had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for me to come home. The beating heart of this franchise, at least at this point, back in Greece, lies in the cognitive dissonance between Kratos' stated motivation for revenge, the actions he takes in the name of that revenge, and his complicity in the circumstances that created those motivations in the first place. You did this for yourself, the memory of our dead wife says, when the Oracle of Athens lays on hands and looks into our soul. And by the gods, I have no reason to doubt our dead nameless wife's read of things. A part of Kratos clearly enjoyed the ultra-violence that propelled him to martial fame. And a part of him clearly does still. I know this because that part of him is me, the player. Kratos can stop and wonder, by the gods, what have I become? All he wants. But when the blades of chaos meet the Cyclops flesh, we are one in our desire to destroy all who oppose us. Up to and including Ares. God of War, then, is a piece of American art from the mid-2000s, about a war veteran with history's worst case of PTSD, going on a game-long fragging mission against the former commanding officer who did him really wrong. Like, really wrong. Like, wow. Nobody frames it that way because, and this is not to insult anybody, this is just a statement of fact, most of the people who make God of War franchise retrospectives were literal children when they first played this game. As a conscious adult who'd read more than 2 books before George W. Bush even stole the 2000 election, I cannot help but read it in those terms. Constant, futile, world-destabilizing warfare, fomented by religious zealots who claim personal relationship with their patron gods, have formed the backdrop of my entire adult life. Perhaps not so dramatically as Kratos's. But then again, I'm not trapped in a melodrama. Most of the time. On the surface, though, God of War is the story of one man's quest for Pandora's box and the god-killing powers within. The box is housed within a massive temple, chained to the back of the Titan Kronos, Zeus's father, who is in turn condemned to wander the desert of lost souls just to the east of Athens for all eternity. This is how Zeus treats his conquered enemies. But inside Pandora's temple, and in the story of its architect, Pathos Verdes III, we find out how Zeus treats his most evangelical supporters. And it's not much better. Pathos Verdes III was a true believer, whose devotion to the gods did him exactly as many favors as it did Kratos. Constructing the massive, self-perpetuating murder maze that we spend the middle third of this game exploring killed his family too. Just one by one, rather than all at once. And the crazy bastard just carried on. Incorporated his son's tombs into the design. We have to rip the heads off their corpses and use them to open doors. After all, the gods came to him, chose him for this critical task, and so his ego and ambition destroyed everything that should have been actually important to him, to the point where he shanked his own wife for the crime of calling him and the gods on their bullshit. Devotion to the gods only gets you one thing in the God of War universe, or ours for that matter. The architect's wife was right. That's the plot of God of War. And the actual story arises from the often room-by-room action of defeating traps, defeating mobs, solving puzzles, and navigating environmental hazards. All of which are standard, for the time, video game platformer bullshit. But some of them are downright mean platformer video game bullshit. Rooms full of crisscrossing saw blades, narrow balance beams around rotating threshers, high above the room full of centaurs we just fought through not 10 minutes ago. Flooded corridor of spikes that closes in on you as you swim through it. I hope you don't have claustrophobia. This is probably not the game for you if you do. And that God's damned hallway full of fireballs. Defeating these together through your own guile and Kratos' quick feet does more to tie the player and protagonist together than all the dead wives and kids in the world. And that's before you climb out of the underworld together. The moment we get Pandora's box, Ares seems to sense it through the Force and pins us to the temple door in our very moment of triumph. We fall into the underworld. But why do we fall, Master Bruce? That's right, it's so we can climb back up. Compared to the box-kicking puzzle guarding the path to the architect's tomb, the challenges of this early 80s Cronenberg-looking Tartarus are less than a speed bump. Except for the damn columns of rotating blades. Those could go to hell if they weren't already in one. And I say that secure in the knowledge that whoever came up with them probably considers that a compliment. We do climb out, too, through a hole dug in reality. By a gravedigger we met outside the Oracle's temple in Athens, way back at the start. He's so totally Zeus in disguise that the game doesn't even try to reveal that here. And I'm just going to pretend that omission is out of respect for the player's intelligence. In ancient Greece, they said you should be nice to strangers, because you could never tell when one of them might be a god in disguise. The other servants of the gods we met throughout this game, the Oracle of Athens, the articulate zombie soldier outside Pandora's temple, have had nothing but contempt for us. But this guy's avuncular as hell. Calls us son a little too easily. Especially given our reputation. Athena isn't the only god keeping an eye on you. And I'm sure that's true. How else could I accomplish all this in the first place? So we get to Ares, open Pandora's box, and grow large enough to 1v1 the God of War, in the very Bay of Athens that we started from. You see, it's like poetry, they rhyme. Phases 1 and 3 of this fight have a deservedly poor reputation, since the game shows its best self in fights against whole crowds. Ares is a tough motherfucker, as one would expect, and as nice as it is to smack him upside the head with a sword that we once walked across as a bridge between the temple level and the sewer level, next to the Blades of Chaos, this sword is as mid as the mid-2000s were themselves. That's why Kratos has the blades in the first place. The game designers correctly realized very early on that giving him a large sword of overcompensation, or even two, would be the worst kind of generic, in what's already, Greek mythology trappings aside, a pretty generic power/revenge fantasy. Phase 2, though, is the best phase of this boss fight, both thematically and mechanically, because Ares uses the blades he gave us to pull us into a much more personal hell than anything the bone and flesh platforms over the bloody river Styx could offer. Suddenly, we're back to normal size, and outside the temple Ares teleported our family to 10 years prior. There they are, huddled by the altar, begging for help in all their low-res character model glory. And here comes a whole army of other Kratoses. Snarling, inarticulate, feral beasts. And we have to kill them all while keeping our wife and daughter's shared health bar topped off, with donations from our own. It's an admission that, though Kratos seeks revenge on Ares, that's only because he can't get revenge on the real author of his suffering. The person he was back when he became Ares' attack dog in the first place. That person is gone. Lost to time. But also still within Kratos, somewhere, as all our past selves live within us to the end of our days. How else could Kratos accomplish so much? Other than the fact that I'm playing him, and that we appear to have the personal backing of Zeus, of course. That's why killing Ares brings no true solace. And why Athena doesn't have the power to do what we ask of her. No man, no god could ever forget the terrible deeds you have done, she says. And so Kratos casts himself from the highest mountain in all of Greece, only to rise again, reborn as the new god of war, with Athena's, and presumably, off-screen, Zeus's blessing. The caption overlooking the battleground where Ares died reads, "The gods have decreed you will not die this day." And it's even worse than that. The gods have decreed Kratos become what he's hated most for 10 goddamn years. You know, as a reward. Congratulations, the message before the credits roll reads. You have conquered God of War. But really, it's more like, in George W. Bush's America, God of War conquers you. What could be more quintessentially early 21st century American than a story about not getting what you want, or getting what you thought you were promised? But hey, you get to become what you hate, and get a place in the power structure that destroyed your life in the first place, so you can go on and destroy other people's lives. Don't like it? Well, what the fuck are you, some kind of terrorist? Why do you hate America? How could you or anyone hate the power structure that gave you so many shiny objects to play with? For example, Athena even gives us back the blades Ares took from us during the boss fight. While the debate in the fandom about whether they are the same blades can approach absurdly metaphysical levels, my rebuttal to all that is, come on, people. I mean, come on. They may be blinged up in gold and blue, rather than the angry red they get when you level them all the way up. But they're the same blades with the same moves, and by giving them back, Athena's pulling the same power move that Ares pulled when he seared them to Kratos' flesh in the first place. Turned slightly on its side, this whole narrative becomes the story of Athena finally finishing what she started, back when she stabbed Ares in the crotch during the Iliad. Killing her brother and replacing him, if not with herself, then at least with a hand-picked ally, seemingly in her debt. Athena is usually called a goddess of wisdom these days. Got statues all over colleges, and that's true. It's fine, that's alright. But in her time of real worship, she was as much a god of war as her brother, a goddess of strategy and tactics, whereas Ares was the god of indiscriminate slaughter. If you absolutely positively had to kill every motherfucker in a polity, you could pray to Ares, though even then there were better candidates. But if you wanted to actually win a war, your ass was praying to Athena. She's the only one in this narrative who gets what she wants. And the fact that Kratos doesn't realize this is why his epithets really should be Mark, Rube, or Sucker, instead of Ghost of Sparta, or God of War. They could have left him here, on his unasked-for throne, glowering down upon a world that now holds nothing for him, not even the hope of salvation. But this wouldn't be a franchise retrospective if they did that. And it's good they didn't. Because while this story is as straightforward as the movies that inspired it, its writing goes from functional to over-the-top with almost nothing in between, and the gameplay now feels like a prototype of itself, there are actual themes at work under the hood here. Which is more than most video games, at the time and since, can say for themselves. If only other teams of creatives, or even basically the same team, now freed from the need to set up a whole damn world, had the time and money to explore the themes they've set up in this one to their logical conclusion. Oh wait, they did just that. So I guess join us next time for God of War, Chains of Olympus.
So getting revenge cost him his freedom. Hope it was worth it.
It was not.